Hello, A Life Outside podcast people. It's Danny. Last spring, I went to Red Rock Canyon and I stayed at the campground the night before. I used to live in Vegas, so I'd never stayed at the campground, and that meant I'd never been on this trail. I don't know how, though. I thought I'd seen almost every trail around Red Rock. That's one of the neat things about experiencing a place that you've lived or live as a tourist, because you get to see it with different eyes and see different things. The sunrise was pretty much why I wanted to stay at the campground. I'd never seen it from this perspective, which I'm embarrassed to admit because it was really easy to get here and I could have at any time over the many years I lived in Vegas. So Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area has entry times now. You have to make a reservation. So I had a little time to kill in the morning. I made some coffee. I got a story written for the podcast and had a good breakfast. I hadn't stayed in a paid campground since Joshua Tree, and even that one was kind of primitive. It was nice to have a picnic table and a covered spot to do my writing and hang out in the morning. It was a little different than perching on rocks or hanging out of the back of my car. It's also kind of strange, the whole concept of having to wait to go to Red Rock Canyon, because I used to go there all the time whenever I wanted. In fact, I used to just park right by the entry station and go in, even though I had a year pass, because I like the trail. There's a trail that goes all the way around, and the first part of the trail connects down into some really neat places that a lot of people miss because most people naturally drive in and drive straight ahead to what I'm looking at, those beautiful red rocks, which is what this place is named after. It was sort of strange to be back in Red Rock Canyon after not being here, after having lived in Las Vegas and coming here as often as I did. I mean, it really was the place that I would come to exercise almost every day, or just to get to nature because it was so close to where I lived. I ended up driving past the first few stops and parked in the Calico Tanks parking area. It leads to some of my favorite Red Rock Canyon hikes. Calico Tanks is a fun one, and if you go past the tanks, there's a great view of Vegas. But I decided today to go the other way back into Calico Hills. The trail was relatively quiet. It was funny because the parking area was packed, so maybe everyone was going to Calico Tanks, or maybe everyone was just kind of driving through. It did seem like a bit of a different type of visitor that was there, and maybe that has something to do with the reservation system. I can't say that I would be apt to want to plan to go to Red Rock if I lived there, unless it was a special event, but there are a lot of reservations available, so even if I lived there, I'm sure I wouldn't have a problem getting in on most days. And these are the rocks that are the quintessential red rocks that the canyon is known for. There's a lot more to this area, but this is definitely one that I would recommend stopping by and checking out. And if you have a lot of time, the slot canyons down below are phenomenal. But I have to say that one of my all-time favorite Red Rock Canyon activities is just climbing up on a rock and hanging out in the sun for a little bit. I mean, how can that be bad? But it's also fun to climb rocks. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed this area, so I played like a little kid for a bit. I was actually sort of surprised how much time I ended up staying up in the Calico Hills area. I didn't really accomplish a trail. I just meandered around and climbed up and down rocks and into canyons. So it was time to head in a little bit. Plus, the crowds were getting heavier as the day was going on, and I don't know. It was lunchtime, I guess, and I wanted a new view. So I went and found one of my old standbys and had a nice little lunch. The sun was pretty intense that day. Well, I mean, it is Vegas. So I stayed in my car for lunch and took advantage of the shade. But I still had a good view, and there were some people filming something just right by me, so that was kind of fun to watch as well. But that's just typical of Vegas. There's always something going on, no matter what time of day or where you are. After lunch, I tucked into a few of my favorite spots along the loop, but I didn't take any intense hikes. I don't know. I should have. I should always take advantage of being in an area. But that just means I'll have to go back again and stay longer next time so I can get all of my favorite hikes in. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time or outside.